My daughter was involved in hiding my wife's infidelity. After uncovering the betrayal, I decided to disown her, expose the affair, and divorce my wife. The devastation hit me hard when I discovered my wife had been unfaithful twice and was planning another betrayal. I had read about the overwhelming emotions someone experiences when they realize their seemingly strong and dependable marriage was just an illusion. Once the emotional storm passed, I saw my marriage for what it had become: completely unrecognizable. Trust, respect, admiration, care, and love had all disappeared, leaving only a deep sense of devastation that pushed me toward giving up entirely. I wanted to end the marriage because nothing was left to save. My wife had turned our life together into a worthless mess. Susie and I had a heated argument about remodeling our living room. She thought the furniture was old and insisted on redecorating, but I pointed out it was only 2 years old, expensive, and still in excellent condition. She refused to listen and demanded something new, and I might have made a mistake by suggesting she was growing bored with me. In response, she sarcastically remarked that maybe she should sleep with someone else. Furious, I shouted that she should figure out what she wanted but not expect me to wait around for her. When she added that she should have married Bill instead of me, I completely lost it, yelling that I never wanted to hear his name again and firmly refusing to replace the furniture. The argument ended, and I left for the club to cool down. Bill had always been my biggest rival, the golden boy in our community. He had once pursued my wife, but she ultimately chose me. However, during a brief separation in our relationship, they crossed paths again, and he nearly succeeded in taking her away from me. Despite all my efforts and achievements, Bill's seemingly effortless success always made me jealous. I wasn't interested in a business career like his, but my upbringing emphasized values like hard work, honesty, and reliability. Even so, I couldn't shake my sensitivity about Susie's past with Bill, especially when I recalled their first meeting and how he touched her. Around 9 p.m. that night, my home phone rang while I had my mobile with me. I let it go to voicemail, avoiding a conversation with Susie because I was afraid of saying something I might regret. Later, I listened to the voicemail, which was an apology for our earlier argument. The caller urged me to contact Susie since I wasn't planning to return home anytime soon, and left a cryptic remark suggesting she might go out alone. This only fueled my anger further. I poured another beer and drank it quickly before deciding to go find her. Checking various parking lots outside local bars turned up nothing. Her car was nowhere to be found. Thinking she might be with someone she knew, I drove to her best friend Patty's house, where I found Susie's car parked outside. Dave, Patty's husband, answered the door and casually mentioned that the women had gone out for the night. When I asked about Patty's car, he confirmed that it was at a bachelor party. Determined to find them, I drove to the bachelor's house and saw Patty's car parked outside. I debated confronting Susie directly, but decided to sober up in my car first. Around 11 p.m., Susie and Patty came out, got into Patty's car, and headed toward a bar downhill, just as Dave had said. I followed them at a distance as they moved to their next destination. At exactly 11:30 p.m., they arrived at what seemed to be their last stop, a pub attached to a hotel. Concerned about Susie's intentions, I knew I needed to investigate further. I grabbed a plain t-shirt and a baseball cap from my trunk to create a makeshift disguise. Although the t-shirt had my name on it, I figured it was better than no disguise at all. Once inside, I spotted Susie sitting with Bill at a table in the back of the bar. They were deeply engrossed in conversation. I moved to an empty booth nearby and tried to listen in. Although I missed a few whispered words, I caught most of their conversation. Susie expressed her gratitude to Bill for coming, and he reciprocated. Bill reminisced about their history, dating back 5 years ago and twice since my marriage to Susie. It became clear that their meeting that night was fueled by revenge after our earlier fight. Listening to their conversation, the painful truth began to sink in. Susie had already betrayed me twice and was planning to do it again that night. Her actions weren't motivated by love, but by a desire for revenge, revealing her selfishness and lack of consideration for our relationship. This realization was heartbreaking. The love I once felt for her was gone. The loss was overwhelming, and I nearly broke down in tears. Accepting that it was truly over, I tried to process what had happened while waiting for them to make their next move. When they stood up and headed toward the elevators, my anger simmered, but I restrained myself from acting impulsively. I followed them to the lobby and approached the receptionist, asking to call Bill's room. When Bill answered, he angrily corrected me, saying it was room 422, not 312, and warned me not to disturb them again, threatening to involve the police. Ignoring his warning, I took the elevator to the 4th floor. Outside room 422, I listened until it was obvious what was happening inside. I knocked loudly, then slammed the door so hard the safety chain broke. Inside, I found Bill, completely undressed, and Susie on the bed. Her face turned pale and she screamed. Bill, recovering from the shock, demanded I leave and threatened to call security. Susie begged me, but I firmly told her not to come home. Strangely calm, I sat in my car for a while, trying to gather my thoughts. I waited to see if the police would show up or if Susie would leave with Bill. After about 15 minutes, Bill left the hotel and Susie got into her car. They didn't stay in the room after I left, but the damage had already been done. Adding insult to injury, the ordeal sparked an idea. I returned home and went to bed. I wasn't certain what time the phone rang, but it was Patty calling. She mentioned that Susie was at her place with Dave, assuring me there was no need to worry. I replied that I wasn't concerned about Susie anymore and didn't care. Patty's call had unnecessarily disturbed my sleep, so I asked the time. She informed me it was 3 a.m. and remarked that I couldn't claim indifference, knowing how much I loved Susie and how much Susie loved me. Patty added that Susie was at their house, crying over her mistakes that evening, seeking forgiveness and asking to come home. I told Patty that Susie wasn't welcome back and asked about her previous encounters with Bill. Patty expressed relief that nothing serious had happened and noted she had been awake since 8 a.m. By 10 a.m., I felt ready to confront Susie. I called Patty and said Susie could return home if she wanted. When Susie arrived with Dave and Patty, likely to ensure nothing got out of hand, I was waiting at the door. She noticed a pile in the front yard and asked what it was. I explained it was everything tied to our relationship, including gifts, photographs, and old furniture. To make a statement, I set our wedding photo on fire, symbolizing the end of our marriage. The flames quickly consumed the pile, leaving behind ashes and the charred frames of furniture. I told Susie she had won and hoped her actions were worth it. I declared our marriage over and said she could take everything, as I wanted nothing and didn't want to remind her of me. I added that my lawyer would contact her soon. Shortly after, sirens approached as the police and firefighters arrived to extinguish the smoldering remains. I apologized for the trouble, explaining that I was burning what was left of my marriage. The officers took me into custody. As they led me away, I saw Susie crying. I spent a few days in jail while a psychiatrist evaluated my mental health. They found that I was deeply distressed and heartbroken, but still mentally stable. Surprisingly, they considered releasing me earlier, but decided to observe me for a few more days to be sure. After paying bail, I retrieved my car from the office parking lot, where I had stored personal items I wanted to keep, mostly clothing and essentials. When my trial began, I admitted guilt to all charges and received a $5,000 fine plus court fees. It felt like a small price to pay to end my broken marriage. Despite this, Susie persistently contested the divorce, leaving voicemails on my phone begging for forgiveness and reconciliation. Even though the process cost $5,000, I left her one final message on her home phone. In it, I told her that while she claimed the relationship meant nothing to her, It had meant everything to me. Once the divorce was finalized, I gave her everything she wanted just to move on. Meanwhile, Bill's wife found out about his involvement and divorced him, leaving him in a dire situation. He wasn't just involved with Susie, he had also comforted other wives during their marital troubles. A few weeks after I found him with Susie in that hotel room, I ran into Bill at a bar. I hinted that he might end up in serious trouble once his divorce was finalized, especially since he had to sell off his remaining possessions. Shortly afterward, Bill left town, and few people seemed to miss him. Occasionally, I cross paths with Susie on the street. She apologizes and asks if I'll call her to talk, but I just nod and keep walking. To this day, I haven't called her, even though she continues to ask. Maybe someday I'll decide to reach out. Story 2. My wife and I have been together for 20 years. We first met as high school freshmen and have been inseparable since. We shared many milestones, from losing our virginity to each other to attending prom and eventually going to the same college. After graduation, we got married and began building a life together. Starting a family was always part of our plan, and once we secured stable jobs, we worked toward making that dream a reality. Fast forward 11 years, and we now have 2 children, own our home, and are on track to retire early to travel and experience everything we've always wanted. Life seemed perfect, until tragedy struck. My sister-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer. She wasn't just family, but also my wife's closest friend. My wife stood by her side throughout her battle with the illness, but tragically she eventually passed away. The loss devastated our entire family, but it was especially hard on my wife. My sister-in-law had been a source of joy in our lives, and my wife struggled to cope, as they had shared everything, from shopping trips to personal secrets. I supported my wife through her grief, helping her navigate the most challenging period of her life. About 6 months later, she began to heal. While mourning, she read through her sister's journals and notebooks, hoping to connect with her emotions and find comfort. What struck her deeply was her sister's feeling that she hadn't accomplished enough in her life, having been taken too soon. These entries inspired my wife to embrace a new outlook, fueled by a desire to live life to the fullest. She wanted to travel, try skydiving, and cherish every moment. I wholeheartedly supported this newfound perspective, as it aligned with why I had worked 60-hour weeks since college to retire early and enjoy life. In the weeks that followed, my wife fully embraced her new philosophy. She took up pottery, taught herself rock climbing, and even planned a bungee jumping trip with our son. It seemed like she was thriving in this adventurous new chapter. I didn't give it much thought, feeling happy for her as she recovered from her grief. However, one evening after returning from the climbing gym, her behavior seemed different. Before that, she had been enthusiastic and optimistic about her new approach to life. After dinner, with the kids in their rooms, she invited me to the patio. We shared a couple of glasses of wine while stargazing. Toward the end of our conversation, she brought up the idea of a hall pass. For those unfamiliar, a hall pass is a one-time opportunity in a monogamous relationship for both partners to have an intimate experience with someone outside the marriage. I was completely shocked by her suggestion, as it seemed to come out of nowhere. When I asked why she was bringing it up, she reassured me that she still loved me, but felt she was missing out on a part of life because I was the only person she had ever been with. She tried to frame it gently, but it was impossible not to feel hurt. I expressed my disapproval of the idea. After 2 decades of marriage, I couldn't understand why this was suddenly an issue. I had no desire to be with anyone else, and couldn't accept the thought of her being with another person. We were about to head inside, but I stopped and asked if there was someone specific on her mind. She hesitated to reveal the truth, but eventually confessed, and there was someone at the climbing gym she found attractive. She explained he had been flirting with her and recently invited her out for drinks. However, she assured me that she had turned him down and clarified that she was married. That night, I went to bed feeling uneasy, and it took me several days to process what she had suggested. The conversation deeply hurt me, but I eventually forgave her, and we acted as though it had never happened. A week later, she mentioned an outdoor climbing class hosted by the gym and expressed interest in attending. One Saturday, she left early in the morning, supposedly for the class, or so I believed. Since our daughter had started lying about her whereabouts, we required her to keep her location visible on Snapchat maps for accountability. That afternoon, when our daughter claimed she was heading to her friend's house, I checked the maps. While her location seemed legitimate, I noticed my wife's avatar in the center of the city. This confused me because she had told me she was going to a park about 30 minutes outside the city. Curious, I checked her location further and saw that she was at a bar. I tried to rationalize this, thinking she might be with people from the climbing gym after their session. However, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my gut, especially after recalling the man from her gym who had invited her for drinks. The idea that she might be with him wasn't far-fetched. Alone at home, I realized the bar was only a 15-minute walk away. Taking the dog for a walk, I kept an eye on her location as I headed toward the bar. When I reached the bar, I peeked through the windows and saw my wife sitting at a table with a man. They were leaning close and smiling as they talked. I watched as the man reached across the table to hold her hand, and she didn't pull away. While hand-holding isn't definitive proof of infidelity, it suggested something more. Feeling overwhelmed, I returned home before my wife could see me and waited for her to come back. The entire time, I debated whether to confront her or gather more evidence first. When she finally arrived, she went straight to the shower without saying anything. I tried to start a conversation, but she brushed me off, saying she was sweaty from climbing. This confirmed my suspicions that something had happened. Her gym bag was lying near our bed, and her phone was inside. I took it and began searching for any clues about the man. In her messages, I found a chat with an unsaved number that had started about a week before she brought up the hall pass. Scanning through their conversation for evidence of an affair, I came across explicit messages, exchanged photos, and plans to meet at the bar. They had even come up with lies to tell me and his partner. Although I didn't know the man, I identified him through the climbing gym's social media. He appeared in several pictures, tagged with his name. Digging further, I learned he was married and had a newborn baby. I felt disgusted by what I had uncovered. Hurt doesn't begin to describe how I felt. After 20 years with my wife, she was willing to throw everything away for someone else. My anger and disgust were indescribable, not just at her, but at him as well. Toward the end of their messages, I found the name of a restaurant along with a date and time for their next meeting. A week passed after I discovered her infidelity, and I came up with a plan to catch her in the act. While planning, I realized the man's wife deserved to know the truth as well. On the day of their meeting, I sent a dozen roses to his wife, including details about the restaurant on the card. I hoped she would believe the flowers were a romantic gesture and go to the restaurant. Outside the restaurant, I saw her enter and followed her inside. Together, we saw our partners holding hands at their table. She stormed over and began yelling at him in front of everyone. My wife, shocked to see me, quickly got up, insisting it wasn't what it looked like. I asked her to explain the text messages, and she fell silent. I told her our relationship was over and that she could expect to hear from my lawyer. The next 8 months were consumed by our divorce proceedings, mainly focused on custody. Both of us fought for primary custody, but the court ultimately ruled for joint custody. I kept the house, and she received no spousal support. Her affair partner's wife also divorced him, and he was ordered to pay child support and alimony. My ex-wife and I recently free from each other. I honestly don't know how to move forward. Having only ever been with one woman and feeling utterly betrayed, I'm unsure what comes next. Story 3. My girlfriend and I had been together for 3 years before our relationship fell apart. I truly believed she was the one and had plans to marry her, but she cheated on me with my cousin. We first met 3 years ago at a nightclub. She was the most beautiful woman there, and although I didn't think I had a chance, I decided to approach her anyway. To my surprise, she was interested, and we had been inseparable since. A year and a half into our relationship, she moved into my apartment. I didn't question it, because I was deeply in love with her. Around that time, my cousin, who had been living down south, got a job in New York. Excited to have family nearby, I helped him secure an apartment in my building. We were close and often played video games online together. I thought it would be great having him nearby. Once he settled in, we started hanging out regularly. Although he openly admitted he found my girlfriend attractive, I never thought he would act on it. For months, I didn't notice anything unusual between them when I was around. They kept their distance in my presence. A few months after my cousin moved in, I was out for coffee with a friend when my cousin showed up with his new girlfriend, who happened to be my girlfriend's coworker. We had tried setting them up at a party before, but it didn't seem to work out. Seeing them together, I thought it was amusing and texted my girlfriend to join us for a surprise. She responded that she couldn't because she was with a friend. Ironically, the friend she claimed to be with was sitting across from me at the cafe. Realizing she had lied about her whereabouts, I made an excuse to my friends, saying she wasn't feeling well and had a migraine. When I got home, she wasn't there, but it was clear she had recently been. Her makeup was scattered on the bed, and several outfits had been tried on. I felt anxious and suspected something was going on. Needing to clear my head, I walked to my cousin's apartment to talk. Despite loud music playing inside, I knocked persistently until he answered. After some shuffling, he opened the door and dismissed me, saying he had company and would come over later. I had no reason to suspect my girlfriend was with him, so I didn't think much of it, until I noticed a shirt I had bought her for her birthday draped over the arm of his couch. Trying to remain composed, I nodded and left. Back in my apartment, I began searching for other signs of her betrayal. Eventually, I decided to access her laptop and review her Facebook messages, only to find conversations with my cousin that completely broke my heart. In those messages, my cousin had asked her what she appreciated about me. She described me as humorous and having a great personality, but he pressed on, saying I wasn't her type. Shockingly, she didn't disagree. Their exchanges were heavily flirtatious, and at one point she sent him the cliché "just got out of the shower" message. They proceeded to swap suggestive photos accompanied by very explicit texts. Earlier that same day, my cousin had sent her a message admitting he couldn't stop thinking about her and that he wanted to be with her. He told her to come up with an excuse to visit his place, and she complied. Realizing that my relationship with my girlfriend was over, I made the decision to cut ties with my cousin entirely. I took screenshots of everything I found, sending them to myself as evidence in case she tried to deny the truth. Thankfully, the apartment lease was under my name, not hers, since she had moved into my place. This allowed me to have the option of evicting her. When she returned home a few hours later, I immediately confronted her, telling her to leave. She appeared confused and asked for an explanation, so I revealed everything I had discovered about her and my cousin. I insisted that she vacate the apartment, warning her of legal action if she refused. I left for the night, giving her 48 hours to pack and move out. During this time, both she and my cousin tried calling me repeatedly, but I ignored their attempts to reach me. Instead, I created a group chat with my relatives and shared the entire story. Everyone, including my cousin's parents, was deeply upset and apologized for his actions, even though they had no involvement. My cousin, however, sent me several angry messages, calling me a coward and claiming that other family members had labeled him a disgrace. I didn't care. He had earned that title. Since my girlfriend and I had mutual friends, I started another group chat to inform them about what had happened. They were shocked and fully supported me. Some of the women in the chat mentioned that my girlfriend had contacted them, asking for a place to stay. Although they felt sympathy, they declined to help, as they didn't condone her actions. 2 days later, I returned to the apartment and found she had moved out. I later learned she had stayed with my cousin, but their personalities clashed, and he kicked her out within a week. After that, I lost track of her whereabouts. Reflecting on the situation, I realized that trusting people, even family, can sometimes lead to betrayal. My name is Jason, and I had been in a 5-year relationship with my ex-girlfriend, Bella. We met at a unisex salon where she worked as a hairstylist. I liked her right away, but never expected our connection to evolve into something so profound. After several visits to the salon, I worked up the nerve to ask for her number, and she agreed. Since we were already somewhat familiar with each other, we quickly started dating, fell in love, and deepened our bond over time. We decided not to rush into marriage due to my painful experience with a previous girlfriend, so I wanted to take things slow with Bella. After 5 years of dating, I finally felt ready to commit. 2 months before the wedding, Bella surprised me with the news that she was pregnant. Although it wasn't part of our plan, I embraced the news as a blessing. Initially, Bella and I had agreed to wait 3 or 4 years after getting married to start a family. She had previously experienced 2 miscarriages, and I wanted to avoid putting her under stress. While the pregnancy brought unexpected joy, planning a wedding and preparing for a baby at the same time was overwhelming. Bella insisted on having the grand wedding she had always dreamed of, complete with an expensive venue, gown, and other luxurious touches. Although she had saved money for the wedding, I believed it would be wiser to allocate our resources towards securing a home and meeting the needs of our growing family. However, Bella argued that the wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event and that we could focus on practicalities later. After much discussion, I agreed to go along with her plans. We booked the venue, paid for the extravagant cake she wanted, and she used her savings to cover the costs of her gown, hairstyling, and other expenses for her bridesmaids. Despite my reservations, I was genuinely excited. I was about to marry the woman I loved, and I trusted her completely. I believed she had been faithful throughout our 5 years together and would continue to be as we grew old. Unfortunately, I couldn't have been more wrong. While I was busy planning our future, my present was crumbling. Bella was secretly having an affair with someone I never would have suspected. The truth came to light the night before our wedding when her jealous lover confessed. That evening, as I returned home early to prepare for my bachelor party, my best man called, asking to meet. We arranged to talk at a nearby coffee shop. When we sat down, he looked visibly uneasy, apologized in advance, and said he had to share something important. Initially, I thought he might back out of being my best man at the last minute. But his revelation was far worse. The times where a heart was piercing her hotel room that night had a great impression. During a pandemic, so many of our friends were playing a prank. But then he showed me an intimate photo of him and Bella, and my heart sank. He also revealed a message she had sent him, saying he should sneak into her hotel room that night. We can't speak about this. Other dreams have gotten involved in so many accidents. Seeing the evidence erased all doubts, and I felt devastated. My best man went on to admit that he was the father of Bella's baby. He explained that they had planned for Bella to tell me the child was mine, to avoid suspicion and ensure we stayed together. In that moment, my world fell apart. I couldn't comprehend how the woman I loved and trusted so deeply had betrayed me. My anger boiled over. I was furious enough to imagine smoke coming out of my ears. When I had heard enough, I exploded, throwing the chair I was sitting on before storming out. My best man followed me and grabbed my arm to stop me, but I punched him in rage and drove off to calm down. I contacted the wedding venue to cancel the booking and managed to get home without losing my composure. Once inside, I broke down and cried uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the pain of Bella's betrayal. While I was still grieving, she called the venue herself to confirm the cancellation. Hearing my voice, she could tell I was deeply upset. I didn't hold back. I told her I knew everything and officially ended the wedding plans. It took her a moment to process what I was saying, but once she understood, she broke down in tears and spent the entire night pleading with me over the phone. Despite my firm stance that I wanted nothing more to do with her, she kept calling incessantly. I avoided staying at home, anticipating that she might show up to beg for forgiveness in person. She even suggested that we go through with the wedding and try to fix things afterward, primarily to avoid the embarrassment of a last-minute cancellation after boasting to her friends about our plans. In the end, the wedding never happened, and I knew I could never forgive her for what she had done. 5 years of effort and sacrifice vanished in an instant. I wished there were legal consequences for infidelity and emotional betrayal so I could take her to court and make her pay for the time and pain she stole from me. We haven't seen each other since, and she hasn't had the courage to face me after I called off the wedding. I moved into the house I had rented for us as a surprise, focusing on healing and moving forward a little more each day. Unexpectedly, my former best friend and best man tried to reach out to apologize and explain their affair, but I wasn't interested. I told him there was no place for him in my life anymore and that we could never be friends again. Since then, we've had no contact and I'm determined never to speak to him again. If that seems immature, I don't care. As for Bella, she didn't keep his child. She chose to terminate the pregnancy as an act of spite. They are no longer together, which doesn't surprise me. This whole experience has taught me a hard lesson, and I know I won't allow myself to love that deeply again. Sometimes, I regret pouring so much time, energy, and resources into someone unworthy of it. Looking back, I wish I had invested all of that into my own life instead. But as the saying goes, as long as you're alive, there's always hope.